Welcome to the Shebeen. How's it going? What you didn't see behind the scenes there was we forgot to go live for 2 minutes and we were talking away thinking you were all there.
I'm going to rat you out here. That's the second week that's happened. Not last week, but the week before when we were having our lovely introduction in Spanish. We thought we'd nailed it. We did great. We couldn't understand why no one was complimenting our lovely language and we forgot to go live.
Honestly, this is not a professional stream, as is evident from every week that we go live. Anyway, you're welcome. We're live now, and it's good to have you here. And looking forward to sharing some Irish whiskey with you all over the next 8 or 9 hours. Lauren, what are you sipping on there?
So I have 2 whiskies lined up tonight in the form of Method of Madness French Chestnut finish. And then following that, I will have a wee drop of Har's Johnson and Cask Strength. So that's in my glass tonight. We're sticking with Middleton this evening. What about yourself?
By chance, I'm also at Middleton. I'm drinking a drop of Redbreast 10-year-old Distillery exclusive. And the reason for that is we're going to do a tasting of this with our Stories and Sips Whiskey Club members in January. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But I'm sipping Redbreast 10-year-old to begin. I've also got a drop of Clonakilty on standby. Clonakilty Double Oak. So we're staying in Cork for everything. Lauren loves Cork and what's not to love. This is the small batch Double Oak. And I'm drinking that because we just launched a competition in our Facebook community, Irish Whiskey Fans of America, to win a 32-year-old sample of the 32-year-old single malt. Amazing prize, thanks to the Scully family. This is going to wing its way to a lucky winner in the United States. 50ml sample of the 32-year-old single malt. Go to Irish Whiskey Fans of America Facebook group if you want to win that. All right. What's the crack in the world of whiskey with you this week, Lauren?
Well, this week we had a little teaser. So Irish Whiskey Experiences World, we had a little teaser of a whiskey bus, which may or may not be being announced in the next few weeks. So we are not going to reveal exactly where we're going just yet. We'll start to tease that out in the new year. We'll get Christmas and the new year over us first, and then we'll start to tease exactly where we're going. However, we do have dates, which is really exciting. So our next whiskey bus will be announced, as I said, in January for September 2024. And it will be the week beginning, no, not the week beginning, the date beginning 21st of September to the 28th. And the image that you see on the screen is a little clue about where we might be going. Now, don't start thinking that we're going to Iceland or Norway or somewhere you can see the Northern Lights. We instead are going to make our own Northern Lights. We're going to find our own Northern Lights and define that for ourselves. So that's all you're getting so far. But yes, we're getting ready, getting geared up, and visiting a few spots, a few meetings this week to finalize a few things and get everything in line. And I'm very excited for this one.
You've been busy. There's lots going on in the world of Irish whiskey. So it's the time of year where more and more producers are trying to take advantage of the holiday spend, Christmas gifting. I've never, ever seen so many whiskeys being released as I have in the past 3 or 4 weeks. It's not slowing down. I see next week there's a pile coming, the week after that. Everyone's trying to get whiskeys out, and it's a tough market at the moment, I think, because everyone's saving for Christmas, and I would argue that there aren't as many disposable funds available this time of year, but it has not slowed down the number of releases, has it?
Not at all. I mean, I think this week alone was crazy for releases. The Friend at Hand Cologne exclusive, the Clonakilty, as you say, it doesn't show any signs of slowing down at the minute. The Teeling, the Irish Malt exclusive in there as well. I think this was probably the heaviest week in a while for releases.
In a long time. Where we get news of a new release officially in terms of a press release, details of it, we add it to irishwhiskeywatch.com, and you can sign up there, put your email address in there, you'll get a notification every time there's one released. What you won't see there, though, is if a distillery or a brand releases a whiskey, doesn't do any announcement, puts it for sale, it either sells out or it doesn't, but they don't give us any news of it. We're not yet the news organization that's able to write full-blown reviews and reports on every whiskey that exists. We're rather kind of depending on the brands to tell us But in any case, you'll find all the new Irish whiskies where we have information on irishwhiskeywatch.com at any time. Some quick news before we get into our whiskey wishes for 2024. We've got a Stories and Sips Whiskey Club tasting coming up on December 6th. That is, what's that, Thursday night? No, not
Wednesday.
Wednesday night.
Wednesday's the 6th.
Wednesday's the 6th. We're doing a tasting with W.D. O'Connell, Daithí O'Connell, of our 2 Stories and Sips Whiskey Club releases, and also the 3 sample bottles that came in our bundle, our birthday bundle. So you'll find the details to register for that on storiesandsips.com. Join Daithí O'Connell, 7 p.m. Eastern, for a tasting. Really looking forward to cracking these open with Daithí and having him tell us the journey of these whiskeys. So that's coming up. I know many of you got hold of those, so I'm excited for those. Then some exciting news. Save the dates. We'll announce more details of this either later this week or early next week. March 1st to 3rd, we're going to break some records. The last 2 years in Ohio, we have opened up one of the oldest and rarest bottles of Irish whiskey in the world, a Middleton Very Rare Silent Distillery collection bottling. We started 2 years ago with Chapter 2. Last year, we opened Chapter 3. Last year, we raised $70,000 for charity. This year, we are opening Chapter 4 times 2. We have 2 Chapter 4s. Never in the history of the Silent Distillery collection have 2 bottles been opened at the same time. We're opening them in 2 different places, in Columbus and Cleveland, Ohio, 2 separate fundraising events. We're also opening a bottle of Forêt de Tronchet, that wonderful French oak, matured, finished Middleton Very Rare, French Forêt de Tronchet, the Tronchet forest, where incredible wood is grown. And that's going to be part of our tasting, as well as like 5 or 6 other amazing tastings. And it's going to be co-hosted between Kevin O'Gorman, master distiller from Middleton Distillery, and myself. And Kevin will be bringing some samples directly from the casks in the distillery over to pour at these fundraising events. March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. There'll be 3 separate events. You can register for 1, 2, or 3 of them. It's up to you. Stay tuned. It's going to be big. It's going to be big. Really looking forward to this. We're excited to pull this out.
What an opportunity. An added bonus of the Forêt de Tronchet onto the Silent Distillery and cask samples, and all for such a good cause as well. Gutted to miss that now, in fairness. There's a bus coming.
Honestly. And I mean, if you didn't have a whiskey bus to be planning for a few weeks later, you'd be there yourself.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say I may be in the depths of finalizing and making sure everything's in line for our Wild West adventure a few weeks later.
This is going to be an incredible opportunity for us to raise funds for 2 different charities this year, including Malky House, who we've been raising money for the last 2 years. But another bar owner has stepped forward and said he wants to join in. He wants to support charity as well. And he's committing to buying a bottle of Silent Distillery Chapter 4, as well as Sean Gormley. So we're going to share more details of this in the coming week or 10 days. Lots of moving pieces with this. But all I'll say for now is that March 1st to 3rd is just prior, obviously, to St. Patrick's Day, but it's actually just after something big that'll be happening with Middleton. Middleton Very Rare was launched in 1984. So if you do the math, 2024 is 40 years. I'm just saying that there could be some news, there could be some interesting tie-ins with 40 years of Middleton Very Rare. We're going to say no more. Sinead. All right. We talked about the wonderful trip to Lapland with Lauren.
Yes, exactly. We're going in search of the Northern Lights. We've changed away from Ireland. We've moved away. We want to go somewhere else. So we've centered a whiskey bus around Lapland and Iceland.
If you're not signed up for our emails for our trips, folks, irishwhiskeyexperiences.com is where you can put your email address in. It's not going to cost you anything to learn about what we're doing. And it looks like next year we'll have possibly 4 to 5 buses. Some of them are private, where groups have come and said they want to take over the bus. Some are going to be publicly announced, like this one we're announcing in January for September. We've got our Wild West one in March, which we'll be going and doing some kind of a reconnaissance mission on that in January to find out, or to make sure everything's in place as well. So there's lots going on that we want to share with you. So sign up at irishwhiskeyexperiences.com. Lauren, it's been a busy year in the world of Irish whiskey. Next week, we're going to recap our favorite moments of 2023 in the world of whiskey. And we're not allowed to mention the hiring of you into Irish Whiskey Experiences as being any kind of a highlight. If anything, it's been a very expensive endeavor for us to have you on board.
Well, I was going to say, if I'm not top of your highlights of 2023, I will be severely disappointed.
You are definitely top of our costs, so we'll definitely mention you. We'll definitely mention you. But that's next week. Next week, we're going to talk about our highlights of 2023. But tonight, we want to talk about some of the things we'd love to see in the world of Irish whiskey. And I think it's actually a privilege for us to be able to, for the industry to be in a position where we can throw wishes out there, because it's so buoyant right now. And luckily, touch wood, there's such great things happening in the world of whiskey. We get to be a little bit maybe dreamy and maybe put a bit of vision to things and say, but what if we also did this? 20 years ago, we would have been saying things like, it'd be great to have a single malt. It'd be great to have a pot still next year. But now we can say crazy things about what we'd love to see, and we can dream big. And maybe if a distillery or brand is watching, they might take it on board and say, we'll do it. But it's been a very big year, hasn't it, for the world of whiskey?
Massive. And I think the more that we have witnessed the growth of the industry, the more we have seen what's possible and how far you can push boundaries, what is possible with brands, their representatives, the masters. I mean, the creation of Irish Whiskey Experiences was off the back of what was possible during the Whiskey Bus. So it's really interesting. And even if we look at our friends over in Scotland, some of their experiences, like the Johnny Walker experience in Edinburgh, and how fantastic certain distilleries are over there in Macallan and Glenlivet and so on, you do kind of look to be like, okay, Ireland needs to kind of get on the back of some of these things. So I think we've got a really nice mixture in here of kind of brand, not necessarily brand specific, but maybe release specific, and then kind of experience wise and people wise. So I think we've covered a nice broad spectrum with our wishes.
And feel free as well to let us know your wishes for the world of Irish whiskey in 2024. We got some comments during the week in our Facebook community about what you'd like to see. We'll talk about some of those things. We incorporated them, but again, we'd love a discussion on this. And if you think we're mad, crazy, lunatic on some of them, feel free to let us know, and we can ban you accordingly and never allow you back. We're going to present these in no particular order. We're just going to dive straight in, I think, and have a chat. It'll be all over the place in the best way, as if we're stuck in the pub. You're stuck with us. We have you cornered. Your back is to the wall. We're on the outside stools, so you can't actually leave your seat because we have you pinned into the wall, and we're trying to tell you, do you know what another thing should be in the world of whiskey? Let me tell you. So you're stuck with us.
Locked in. I mean, I think all of them are relatively reasonable and very doable. I don't think there's anything here that's asking an awful lot of either brands or the industry in general. So, well, I mean, we'll see what everyone else thinks. But yeah, there were some great suggestions in the group this week of what people would like to see. Tended to be more release specific, of course. We're going slightly outside of releases, but yeah, we may as well crack on.
I mean, we could end this right now, not worry about any of these slides, by just saying very simply, we would like the oldest whiskey for the smallest amount of money, and that's it. And we're done.
Or I could just wish that all of our whiskey buses sell out next year and we call it a day and go to bed.
Well, Lauren, if they don't, we're going to be having conversations. It's as simple as that.
That's on me.
All right, we'll crack into it. All right, this is I came up with this one. We've seen a lot in the past few years of different focuses in the world of Irish whiskey on elements of whiskey production, be it the shape of the stills, be it focus on wood and finishing, focus on terroir, provenance, barley, the grain, and even water to an extent. But one of the things, and one of the biggest flavor creators in whiskey production, hasn't yet had its time in the sun, I don't think, in Irish whiskey, and that is yeast. So yeast really is the flavor creator. Obviously, it needs its ingredients. It needs its sugary. It needs its sugary washes. It needs the grain. It needs a flavorful grain. It needs the right proteins and sugars. But without the right yeast, we don't get the flavors we want. Most distilleries in Ireland use pretty much the same yeast. They use a bag of distiller's yeast that'll be most likely sourced from England or Scotland, and that's a standard across the board. Yet in other whiskey jurisdictions, they're experimenting in a big way. I was in Edinburgh a few weeks ago, and one of the distilleries that is doing amazing things with yeast is called Holyrood Distillery in Edinburgh, and it's the first new distillery in Edinburgh in more than 100 years. And they have 35 different strains of yeast that they use for their whiskey making, including things like they use brewer's yeast, distiller's yeast, winemaker's yeast, and even sake yeast strains. And they're doing everything like passion fruit wine yeast. They're using Black Death yeast. They're using fresh Nottingham ale yeast, IPA yeast, Hefeweizen yeast, Edinburgh ale yeast. The list goes on and on and on. And I think there's an opportunity for Irish whiskey to do more with that. And I know some distilleries are already doing that. They just haven't released the fruits of their labor. But I'd like to hear more about it. And I'd like some folks in the world of distilling to talk about the difference between live yeast strains, those that are not live, and help us understand how flavor is created and help us understand what to look out for when we're buying a whiskey.
Yeah, and I think, you know, of course, I'm sure there are distilleries across Ireland that are doing it, but it would be nice if they maybe shouted a bit louder that they are doing it, something a little bit different, which could also come into the our point, which I think we cover later on transparency. You know, include the yeast information on the back of the bottle as well, if it is something different. Like, I mean, I know when we visited Titanic a few weeks ago on our whiskey weekend in Belfast, they declared that they were using white wine yeast. And, you know, they were saying that they were kind of being a little bit different, kind of thinking outside the box a little bit more. So, you know, they should even shout about that more as well. So definitely it's something, yeah, it'd be great to see. I thought that was really interesting, Barry, the information you shared about Holyrood. But I'd love to try some of the new mix from different kind of yeasts that they use. Like, that would be fantastic.
And that's what they do in Holyrood, is they, in their gift shop, they make available all the new make spirits with all the different yeast strains. Because obviously Scotland is fairly restricted. When you make single malt, it's just 100% malted barley. So their mash bills don't vary very much. So they rely on the wood and the yeast now increasingly to differentiate, which is interesting. So that's my first whiskey wish anyway for 2024.
That's a fair point. I think that's very reasonable. This one, I think, I imagine would be popular with a lot of people in the group.
It's another one, yeah. I was talking about this during the week. So I think we've shared in our whiskey pricing overview in the past, Lauren, the amount of money, the amount of euros that are taken out of a bottle of whiskey that goes straight to the government is 40 to 50%, depending on the price of a bottle. And it is so prohibitive and so unfair. I think it's the second highest taxation in Europe on alcohol and spirits. It's unbelievable. And it is not, I think the argument is twofold. One, the government say, well, look, it's an essential lifeline for us to provide other services. The tax take is so great on the alcohol that's produced. And the other line is that it's helping us fund alcohol education programs. I would argue it's not doing a very good job of the second. And I think there's other ways to do it. I think that we're overtaxed on alcohol, both in production and consumption. So the poor consumer is the one that has to pay it all. We're across the board, spirits, wines, beers, we're overtaxed. And I'd love to see a reduction in taxation that allowed for new entrants, that allowed for the government to take their tax in other ways, like in the return on investment, the return to the economy or to the exchequer on everything from payroll taxes that they might get if more people are able to be employed, more visitors to distilleries are able to reinvest into their distillery experiences. I think it's a bit short-sighted to just go straight for tax production as it's been done since the 1820s. I'm not a fan.
Yeah, and I think it is heavily linked to that fear, I guess, in Ireland of the overconsumption, as you said, and alcohol being too easily accessible for people. They don't want to have it, extremely affordable, I guess, for obvious reasons. But even the likes of the minimum unit pricing as well, that was that 2 years ago, obviously had a massive effect. And it actually obviously led to a lot of off licenses retailers in the Republic losing money because any of the people who were near border towns came north and were able to get it a lot cheaper. So it does have a kind of knock-on effect that you don't really realize. I think the government just are thinking about the number one thing, which is the kind of emphasis on the overconsumption, but they aren't thinking about the wider sort of effect that it does have. So I mean, I think we might have a few years to work on this one before it's realized, but
would you have this, maybe you could have this solved by Wednesday if you don't mind?
I'll try. Yeah, I'll try. I'll get into contact with a few of my government representatives, and we'll see.
That'd be helpful. That'd be helpful. The minimum unit pricing you talked about there was an interesting program, interesting in the worst way, announced, I think, a couple of years ago and went into effect last year, where in Ireland now you cannot sell alcohol below a certain price. And the argument was that if you raise the price of alcohol, you will reduce the number of people who buy it, therefore reducing Ireland's dependence on alcohol. Ridiculous argument. If you're an addict to alcohol, as many sadly are, pricing is not the thing that keeps you from it. Instead, you find other ways to get the money to get your alcohol. And furthermore, the additional money that was taken in this minimum unit pricing was not earmarked or used for any programs, social programs or educational programs. Instead, all the shops get to keep the increased pricing. So it was basically the government saying, you have to sell it higher. And all the shops are saying, okay, that's fine. We'll do that. No problem. Because we make all the money. Ridiculous. Yeah, absolutely ridiculous.
Exactly. There's no logic to it whatsoever. I think it's a very outdated thing, an outdated element of the pricing in Ireland. So honestly, yeah, I mean, I think there is work. I think there is work going on behind the scenes with the likes of the Irish Whiskey Association. They are trying to kind of fight back with it to a certain extent anyway, but whether or not they make any headway is a very different matter.
I'll give you this one.
Yes, this is a great one. So this was something that I shouted about quite a lot when I was with Bushmills.
You work for Bushmills?
I did, yeah. Did you know that? No, never mentioned it. No. So there used to be packs with I think it was the original Blackbush and 10 year in the 90s, little 50 ml miniature bottles in a pack, and it was great. It sold really well. For people who maybe only had hand luggage with them, for example, if they were flying over to Ireland, only brought hand luggage, carry-on bag to bring home. It was great for Christmas presents, gifting, so on and so forth. Miniature bottles and little gift packs and little sample packs can do no harm to a brand, because if someone maybe is starting out on their whiskey journey, maybe someone is just starting to become familiar with a certain brand, you might not want to splash out in a full-size bottle, because how do you know if you're going to like it? It's a very simple logic. You don't want to spend full price if you're not going to like the whiskey. So having miniature bottles, smaller sizes, little sample bottles, gives the consumer the opportunity to sample something before they buy a full-size bottle. Yes, I know there's challenges with sourcing miniature bottles. It's actually very expensive to create miniature bottles of whiskey, but the return on it ultimately could be multiple sales of full-size bottles, so they kind of recuperate the cost in some way. I think it's a great point, and another one which we'll come on to about drivers as well, but that's a different matter. Yeah, I think there should be more of them.
The miniature bottle thing for me has been a bit of a bugbear, and it's one I bring up regularly with makers. One of the responses I've got is the logistical difficulty of not even just the sourcing of the bottles, but the actual bottling line. So
yeah.
Filling miniature bottles requires literally a miniature bottling line, or the retooling of an existing bottling line for the miniatures, which is a real issue. One of Ireland's shortfalls right now in the world of whiskey is warehouse space and bottling capacity.
Yeah.
We don't have the lines available. So a lot of miniature bottles are hand bottled, and that's a laborious process. But there has to be some way to find a middle ground, because every distiller and brand that also tells me how difficult it is to miniature bottle, 5 minutes later says how important it is for them to get liquid to lips, to get people to taste and try the whiskies.
Yeah.
And us, Lauren, on the island of Ireland, find it very easy. Any night of the week, you or I could go to a whiskey tasting in Ireland. There's one every night of the week somewhere, right?
Yeah.
I could be from my door to your door in 5 hours, which means that it's only 5 hours from one coast in the south to the other coast in the north. We could go anywhere in the country to get a whiskey tasting. It's not as easy in the United States.
You're
Irish
right.
whiskey tastings are few and far between.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a great way as well for online tastings, as you say, even not necessarily in the US, but just everywhere. It's so easy if brands, it would actually, I think, encourage people to want to host more online tastings for clients and consumers if it was so easy to just buy a pack and send it out. Now, I know Middleton do them. They do them very well. Clonakilty also do them very well. I think you had one there the other day, Barry, didn't you?
There is a little known company called Stories and Sips that does them, Lauren, and has a new tasting box right here. Your sips await, folks. Your sips await. We will be doing this wonderful kit, Stories and Sips, 3 1-ounce samples. Lots of these coming in 2024. Lots of brands lining up to want to send you whiskey, but guess what? We had to get all the miniature bottles together. We had to build out the packaging. This is months of development to get this packaging, to get the right bottle size, to make this robust and ship proof. But we'll be doing many of these. In fact, one of our first tastings that will involve this box is Redbreast. So we are going to do a tasting with 3 different strengths of Redbreast, 43% ABV, Distillery Edition, exclusive 10-year-old Redbreast. We're going to do Redbreast Listau at 46%. We're going to do Redbreast 12 cask strength at 58%. They're going to all go into this box, and they're going to be winging their way to Stories and Sips members in January. And guess who's going to be hosting the tasting? If it isn't the newly crowned master blender, Dave McCabe, he's going to be leading us on a tasting of these wonderful whiskeys. So that's one way we're getting more miniature bottles into people's hands.
You had to take matters into your own hands, not rely on brands.
I'm done waiting. But look, to show I'm impartial, there are great kits out there. Like, here's a great kit from the Irishman. I've used this on corporate tastings. I've sent this across the US. 3 great samples of their blends and their single malts. Really enjoyable. So there are great kits out there, just not enough of them would be my argument.
Yeah, totally. As I said, can't harm a brand.
Cannot. All right.
Yes. So this one was something, I know, Barry, you made this point as well, but it was something that was brought to my attention a few weeks ago when I was in Galway, and on the way home, would have been very rude not to. I stopped into both Tullamore Dew, the Tullamore Dew Distillery, and Kilbeggan as well, because I never actually managed to get to either of those distilleries. So when I was that far away from home and they were en route back home, I called in, and it was the first time when I was booking the tour for Kilbeggan online. It was the first time. Now, I'm sure there might be other distilleries that do this, but it was the first time I had ever seen a driver option where you could check a little box, and at the end of your tour, when you would have naturally had a few samples of whiskey, instead you were reached a little box. It's actually sitting behind me there. You can maybe see it on the box of samples to bring home with you to taste later. I have never seen that option, certainly when booking online for a distillery before. And I think it's such a good idea. You think about how many international visitors that we get to Ireland who are visiting distilleries, but they're maybe calling into one en route to somewhere else. Obviously, they can't sit down and have 3 or 4 whiskeys when they have to drive. So why should they miss out? Why should they miss out on being able to taste a certain whiskey? So I think it's a great idea, and it's something that more distilleries should adopt. And it's so simple to do. Miniature kits, miniature bottles. Even if you had to pay a couple of quid extra to bring it home, I'm sure people wouldn't mind if they really love their whiskey and they wanted to sample. But yeah, hats off to Kilbeggan. I thought it was a great option.
I've not seen it anywhere else, and I think we've got a bigger problem than just logistics in making it happen. I think we've got a social and cultural barrier where there is a kind of a raised eyebrow at somebody who comes to an establishment that serves, sells, makes alcohol that doesn't drink, and that's an issue. Where I was only seeing yesterday a video. A girl posted a video about her sober night out. She had a great night. She was posting a video online, and she had a great sober night out. She was explaining how she's wrecked after it. She doesn't know how people do it who drink and are wrecked. Like she just said, I'm sober. I get to drive home. I drive my friends home. She was delighted with herself. And people in the comments were saying, would you just have a drink and have the crack, for God's sake? It's like, we have a cultural problem, and I think that has to be overcome or addressed head on, which is basically saying, look, I think we have to make it like we did it with drink driving, and we did it with smoking indoors, where we made it socially uncool to do both. Like, I remember when I was young, I remember a lot of people drink driving, and it wasn't socially taboo as it is now. Like now, if you see people drink driving, like, what are you mad? Like, you'd be taking their keys, you'd be calling cabs, and you wouldn't stand for it. So I think the same has to happen now. I think distilleries, like in Scotland, when I was there a few weeks ago, I remember going to one tasting, and when the tour guide noticed I was on my own, she said, "Oh, you don't have a driver, do you?" Like, she was tuned into it, and I said, "No." She goes, "Oh, well, like, we're very strict in Scotland, zero tolerance. I'm going to get you a takeaway pack."
Yeah.
I said, "Great, like, that's no problem. I completely want that." But I still got to sit down, nose the whiskey, and I got to sip it and spit it out. And then I got to to take home a kit. So I didn't consume any alcohol. I enjoyed the experience, and we're missing out on that. And it's a revenue stream for distilleries too. You can charge for the tour, whether somebody drinks there or drinks at home. It shouldn't matter.
Yeah. And it should even be something maybe that distilleries consider. Excuse me, if you are booking online, maybe there's an option. Say if distilleries, like I know an awful lot of distilleries would offer a welcome drink on arrival in the form of an Irish coffee, an old fashioned. There perhaps should be either an option online that you can check that you are a driver and you need a non-alcoholic version of said welcome drink, or it should maybe be something that brand homes and receptions start to ask people if they are driving, to kind of, as you say, curb that sort of shame almost for not having a whiskey. And I see Krista made a comment there, which is, it's a very, very true fact that it's very hard to be out drinking when you're not drinking and everyone else is, because there is that kind of like, sure, go on, you'll have one. Happened to me last Saturday in Belfast. I was driving and everyone was trying to hand me Guinness, and I was like, no. I mean, it is something that definitely needs to be overcome in Ireland, and obviously further afield as well. Sure, the saying used to be 5 and drive, arrive alive. Like, that's crazy. Used to be fine to drink 5 pints and drive. No, we're not doing that.
Somebody was telling me during the week, and like, I know I have family members who've been lost to drink driving, and it's an awful thing. But the culture historically was so different than it is today. But somebody was telling me during the week how I remember meeting them, and they said they were pointing out a pub to me, and they said, "Oh, I remember going to that pub 20 years ago. My brother bought a new car, so we drove down to it to celebrate his new car, and we had a few pints to celebrate the new car." And I said, "What? Like, tell me that again?" And I couldn't wrap my head around it, but that was just the culture at the time, and people were lost over it. Anyway, not to belabor the point, but distilleries, it's not that difficult. Like, let's make this happen. Let's make this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And remove the shame if someone decides not to drink.
This next wish, I think you and I both have some different angles on this. You've been involved in this world, Lauren. I'm going to just give a quick preamble to this, why I put this up here. I've lost count of the number of times I've squirmed and had to bite my lip when I've been in a bar or restaurant and overheard somebody answering a question about a whiskey that is not just incorrect. It's basically, it should be criminalized the way people were describing it, because they hadn't a notion, and they were talking out their left ear or the back of their shoe because they just didn't know, and they were making up the answers as they went along. Brands put so much money into advertising, production, marketing, packaging, and imagine the final mile, the final meter. The whiskey's on the shelf, the customer's here, and the only thing standing in between is somebody with a stupid answer to a question, and they get it wrong. We need better education.
I couldn't agree more. And it was my entire role for the past 5 years has been exactly this, educating bartenders and consumers about whiskey. I think to overcome what you have just said, Barry, about kind of the sort of wincing and trying to be nice when you ask for a certain whiskey that's maybe not as known, and they're kind of searching the back shelves, being like, what distillery does that even come from? And they just don't know. I think there needs to be two levels to this, and I don't think, in full transparency, it's something that will happen anytime soon. But I think there needs to be multiple people in Ireland, whether these are roles created by brands or someone who takes it upon themselves, someone with a great passion for whiskey. There needs to be an education about the history of Irish whiskey and kind of all the significant sort of events that have shaped the industry from 1324 right up until the current day. And then secondary to that, there has to be the emphasis on brand specific education. So the history side of things could maybe be carried out with someone, a whiskey historian, or someone with a great passion for Irish whiskey, who knows their stuff, knows the industry. And then that needs to be followed up with an education by the brands themselves, whether that's Middleton come in and host a 30-person strong bartender training, Bushmills come in, whoever else might join in on that. I think it needs to be a two-pronged approach, because one, it's very, very hard when you have a group of people who maybe don't have as much of an understanding of whiskey, couldn't tell the difference between a whiskey and a rum, for example. It's quite hard to cover the full spectrum when sometimes you might only have an hour window to train them because the bar is very busy, it maybe opens, whatever. So yeah, I think it's so important, and you have no idea, and people still don't have any idea how valuable education is. Anytime I went into a bar and trained the bar staff with Bushmills, the sales the next month skyrocketed because they were confident in selling it. They knew what to recommend. They knew the serves to recommend it with. It was unbelievable, the difference that it makes. So please, brands, listen. More education, train the staff in the whiskey bars, focus on the whiskey bars, and you'll see the results.
I worked in the hospitality industry directly in bars, hotels, restaurants, cruise ships from the age of 15 to 25, 26. So 10, 11 years. Not once in Ireland or anywhere else did I ever get trained on, even working in a bar, on Irish whiskey. Nobody told me anything about it. The turnover on bars is high. Bartenders come and go. It's considered a kind of a transient job for many, sadly. It's not the job that it was, the trade that it was, the craft that it was 50 years ago, where you went through apprenticeships and you had to spend 5 years clearing glasses before you were allowed to talk to a customer. There was a trade and a craft that was very well regarded. It's not looked at that anymore. Look like that anymore. It's also, there's a shortage of people who want to enter the world of hospitality, and for good reason, because I think many have been taken advantage over the years with hours, with pay. It's not great for building a family or living a balanced life. It's rife with all kinds of extremes, which send people in awful directions, as we know. But I think there's somewhere in the middle, which is, I love your idea of having somebody who can train, whose job it is to go around. I think there's also an opportunity to do something like the Dead Rabbit does with their team, which is, there's an online portal where you have to, before you're ever allowed to stand behind a bar and take an order, you know every product, and you know its history, and you know how it's made, and you're able to talk with eloquence and education about it. We've talked about this, Lauren. If you were selling cars, you wouldn't be allowed to stand on the showroom floor if you didn't know anything about the car, because the showroom owner knows how valuable a car sale is. Now, you might argue, well, an $8 shot of whiskey is not going to make or break me. I'm not going to waste the time on training a guy who's going to leave in a week. I think there's somewhere in the middle, online portal, learn, you're graded, you get rewarded, you get paid to do it. That's a start.
Absolutely. Or as you said about the Dead Rabbit, I think there's not a better example of a bar that does education, especially specifically on whiskey, better. Even having someone in the bar that is solely in charge of education. I don't know of any bar in Ireland that actually has one person who is dedicated to bringing in ambassadors, representatives to train their staff, not necessarily just on whiskey. I'm talking everything. Like, I mean, gins, rum, tequila, whatever it might be. It's just, and it's quite hard as well. Like, even from my experience, like you sometimes chase certain accounts and bars for months before they actually commit to a date. So it's quite hard to pin them down as well. So I think it's very, very much needed. And we all know how amazing of an experience it is to go into an Irish whiskey bar, order a whiskey, and the bartender go, yep, no problem, and go straight to the bar, knows exactly where it is, and lifts it down and pours it for you. It just feels great. So more of that is just going to make the industry a better place for everyone. So
it's another cultural thing too, where training has almost seemed like, I already know, like, you know, like there's an attitude element to it where it starts at the top. You get a bad owner who doesn't care. It's going to go all the way down, isn't it?
Yeah.
But look, we could go on all night about that. But look, I think there needs to be more education. Period.
Yeah. We're clearly very passionate about that one. But you're right, was so many really good bartenders and really solid people left the industry over COVID, and I don't think it's recovered. And it's going to be a very long time before we see that level again.
I'll tell you something. Like I always thought that, look, if the businesses I ran failed, if all else failed, I'd go work in a bar again and work serving tables. No problem at all. The problem now, though, is when I first kind of told myself I can always fall back on my hospitality training. That was when hospitality pay at least covered the cost of surviving or living, renting, car. That's not the case anymore. So it's no surprise that people aren't willing to work for so little money with such crazy hours and still not enough to make their payments on rent and all their other bills.
And it's also the challenge as well. Like, I know this is very much a case in Ireland, and specifically in cities in Ireland. So Belfast, Dublin, Cork, a lot of bartenders can't drive. So they're relying on public transport to take them to and from work. So half of their wages in a week is spent on taxis, on Ubers.
Unreal.
Unbelievable.
Anyway, we're here all week.
Putting the worlds to rights. This is like we're sitting in a pub just having a natter.
Honestly, and another thing.
Yeah. I have another bone to pick here.
Okay, this next one, transparency. We've mentioned this quite a few times.
Yeah.
Those who are part of our community know well, like, we're objective as we can possibly be, and we'll call out something when we see it. I've called this out before. I don't think the consumer is currently served by labeling in Irish whiskey. And I think that it allows rogue brands and those that have within the lines of the law, they're able to spin stories and divert attention and make things look different than they actually are. And the consumer is hurt because of it. I believe that.
Completely agree. And we did a great Shebeen on labeling in Irish whiskey, and we delved right into it. It was probably one of our most viewed Shebeens. We did not hold back, because it's true that there's so many brands that you see popping up, and you're kind of thinking, right, okay, who are you? Where does that come from? I mean, by and large, the liquid is Great Northern Distillery sourced, but I think there is a level where you should have to disclose if you're sourcing your liquid from somewhere else that isn't your distillery. Two Stacks have done a phenomenal job of this. I think they're the shining light in transparency in the Irish whiskey industry. Everything you could ever possibly want to know about that bottle of liquid, it is on that label, and it's kudos to the guys. They've done such a great job with challenging that. But I agree completely. I mean, there's so little that you actually by law have to include on a bottle of whiskey. You really can lie an awful lot, and I think to the consumer who maybe isn't as aware as our community would be, they are being fooled to a certain degree. They're hearing of these distilleries that actually don't currently exist. No, it's something that we need to work on.
I know. It's like most laws, they are the result of successful lobbying by groups representing their interest. What was astonishing to me when we did the labeling, Shebeen, when we were doing our research before it, and one of the findings was that the European law, the European directive around labeling that governs Irish whiskey labeling, excludes the requirement for ingredients to be added to the label for anything that's more than 2% alcohol. In other words, basically the higher in alcohol strength it goes, the less you're required to have. I mean, let's not beat around the bush. These are bottles of poison that are sold, like we have to be honest with this. So if I go to the shop, like I bought if I buy a pack of Rashers bacon, it's going to tell me bacon, water, salt. It's going to tell me what's in that. If they pour 2% poutine in there, they wouldn't have to tell me anything. So I think transparency is a big issue, both on the labeling, so the legislative side, but then within the law as it stands right now, I think brands could do a much better job of saying where, like to your point, where their whiskey comes from. There's also examples, there have been examples that have been scolded and reprimanded, brands calling themselves distilleries, releasing whiskey, but it turns out they only have a gin still. So they make gin. So yeah, they're a distillery, but they've been selling a whiskey that says X distillery on the label. So I think we need more transparency. I think us as consumers should be demanding this and requesting this and asking why it doesn't say this and why. Obviously, it's only going to change when it gets voted on by those in a jurisdiction or your elected officials. In any case, we want to see more information about what's in the bottle and how it got there.
Agreed. And it's just part of that wider theme of educating consumers and so they know where their liquid's coming from. It's part of a wider motive. So
I've always thought as well that so Irish whiskey industry, the Irish whiskey category is very different to the world of Scotch at the moment, because Scotch is a mature category comparatively, where there have been so many distilleries around. There's 142, 143 distilleries in Scotland compared to our 42 or 43. And many of them have been around for 40, 50, 60, 200 years. Go all the way back to, I don't know which one claims to be the first. Glenlivet is one that says they're maybe one of the first of the modern breed. But they don't have a big sourcing industry in the way we do now, because we have newer brands that have to find whiskey somewhere. And those brands that source from a existing older distillery that's got mature spirit, they bottle it up, they put it into their bottle, which is perfectly legal to do. I have no issue with sourcing. I think it's a great bridge to your own spirit. But I've always thought it's actually a missed storytelling opportunity to not include where it came from, to not actually say, while we wait for our spirit to sleep soundly in our warehouses and mature, we've teamed up with X distillery, and here's why we love what they do. Amazing. That's great.
Absolutely. And I actually kind of think the same. I know there's some more issues around this point with kind of NDAs and things with certain brands, but even where a brand is using a cask, say they've aged their whiskey in a cask from a specific brand, I'd love for them to be able to say that more. I know that, again, there's illegal issues around there about actually being vocal about it, but I want to know that. That's the kind of information I want to know. Like, where, if your whiskey's aged in a vermouth cask, what vermouth is it? It's just things like that make a difference. So just a wider transparency would be lovely.
Tom says Sheehy's is coming from who? No sourcing on the label. I think it's the opposite, Tom, isn't it? It does say Great Northern Distillery, doesn't it? On you have the bottle there, do you?
No, I don't have it. No, I don't know why I look behind me. I'm thinking if there are two stacks. No, it does. So Anthony's daughter Jade is a blender in Great Northern, so it was very much a family collaboration, and that was the whole kind of point of one of the main reasons why they sourced from there. So yeah, it definitely says distilled at Great Northern.
I thought it said it. I have the bottles downstairs, but no, it's Great Northern Distillery. They were very open about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Lauren, could you turn down your volume a bit there? I'm getting some feedback, if you don't mind.
Of course.
All right. This was you.
This was me. So this can be covered quite generally, I guess, but I think in the Irish whiskey industry and Scotch whiskey industry, of course, we're very comfortable with bourbon casks, with sherry casks, red wine casks, so on and so forth, because they've been used for so many years, many, many decades. And we know you can generally kind of understand what that cask profile will contribute to a spirit and to your whiskey. But I want to see mad casks being used. I mean, mad casks. Like, I'm talking Jaeger, I'm talking Buckfast, Pisco, Fernet Branca. I want to see it. The thing
You
is,
can, but you can't. You legally can't.
You legally can't.
You can't use a non-traditional cask like Jägermeister or Buckfast is disallowed. It's actually cease and desist letters have been sent out by the Irish Whiskey Association on this very topic. You can go wild on spirits like tequilas, mezcals. You can go into all kinds of wines, but even Bailey's, like there was a Bailey's whiskey that had to be withdrawn from the market because it was aged in a cask that contained Bailey's because it was considered not in line with the natural flavor you would expect a whiskey to be, believe it or not.
That is wild. Although I'm pretty sure there are distilleries that have Buckfast casks. Like, I'm almost certain.
Nope. 100%. There's actually a whole story around Buckfast. The monks themselves have written cease and desist letters where any brand has tried to use a buck. Yeah, the monks. They have it. There's a distillery, I think it was in Scotland, tried to use Buckfast, and they were prevented from doing so.
There was also an Irish whiskey at a tasting in Belfast a couple of years ago that was aged in a Buckfast cask as well. Well, I think it should change. I want to see it.
Okay.
So we're basically trying to change the law here in an awful lot of things that we are saying tonight.
That's all right. That's all right. We got time in our hands. We can do it.
But yeah, I think that Richard just said, just say you want the Fireball cask and move on. Not necessarily, just something that's outside the box. I mean, don't get me wrong. I absolutely love sherry cask finishes. I will drink them all day long. But I think there comes a point where, how does a brand do something different? How do you stand out? And a lot of that will come from which casks you use. So I want to see. And I think we could, going back to another point we made, not necessarily full bottlings, do a bit of consumer sort of research and development, send out miniature bottles, offer miniature bottles, and see how they go down, rather than committing to a full sort of bottling of a certain cask that might not sort of resonate with the consumer.
Yeah, I thought you were going in a different direction here. I thought you were going in the direction of, as in like different cask types as opposed to just their inside what was in them before, which is supposed to be another opportunity. Because I know, for example, I had a conversation with a distiller who told me he has an experimental cask made from an apple tree, and he is aging a whiskey and testing it out in an apple tree cask. Can't imagine you get. I mean, an apple tree is not very big now. I don't know what kind of staves you'd be getting out of an apple tree, but that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Like different wood types and trees.
Yeah. I mean, Method of Madness have already done quite a lot of great experimentation with this.
Yeah.
With the wood, which is why, and Middleton as well with the Irish oak. I mean, that was phenomenal. It's a first, but I know I'm talking like really weird things in casks. I would love to see it change.
What you could do is you could get around it. There's a way around it if you were willing to not have the words Irish whiskey on your bottle.
Yeah.
So you could basically say it's a spirit drink.
Exactly. I was going to say put it a little bit lower ABV and call it a spirit drink, and yeah, there you go. I'd love to see it just to see how it would work out. There was someone else as well I can't remember if it was an Irish distillery or a Scottish distillery, but at the same time as the Buckfast tasting in Belfast, they had a blue WKD. I don't know if that is that in the US. It was like a blue WKD. It's an alcopop. It's very, very sugary, very sweet. So I understand the challenges around that as well. But not that. I don't mean that necessarily. But like Pisco, Fernet Branca, things like that. We had a great conversation last week on here about Fireball and Jaeger and Sambuca and tequila.
Honestly. We could go on for hours about this one. There's just so much to it, the experimentation with cask. But a reminder as well that in Ireland we can use any type of wood we want. Scotland is limited to oak. we're not. So we use chestnut, acacia, mulberry, and on, anything we want, as long as it doesn't leak, and oftentimes it does, but we can experiment, which is good.
Exactly. That's what I want. So yeah, I'd love to see that change. Yes, now this one is something that I feel very passionate about. I know a lot of my fellow women in the industry also feel very passionate about this one as well. So this was one of my wishes, off the back of a fascinating article I read from Becky Paskin. So Becky Paskin, she's UK based. I think she's specifically London based. She's a drinks writer and TV presenter, but she's also a massive advocate for women in whiskey. So she has, she's the founder of Our Whiskey Foundation, which aims to provide women in the industry with education, with support, and just really, just support women in the industry and really champion those ambassadors, blenders, distillers, whoever they may be. So Becky did a study of the whiskey industry and how it's marketed, and she did a little bit of research of consumers of whiskey, and she found out that over 36% of whiskey consumers are women. Yet some of the biggest and most well-known whiskey brands globally they post 228% more men across their social media channels. And her sort of aim here was, what she did was provide brands with free content of women drinking whiskey for periods like Mother's Day, Christmas, Easter, which are typically times that you would find gift guides for men, which include whiskey. And the gift guides for women would always include gin, Prosecco, champagne, etc. So she's trying to challenge the industry essentially to realize that there's actually a huge percentage of women whiskey drinkers out there, and to sort of get brands to think about that a little bit more with their marketing. So what I would love to see is, rather than whiskey being pushed always around Father's Day, kind of put it on promotion around Mother's Day as well, around the festive period, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, whenever it may be, whenever people usually pick up bottles of alcohol. That's what I'd like to see.
This is a byproduct of a male-dominated industry where there is an unconscious bias. And I think it takes it being pointed out for it to become a conscious bias or a conscious decision to do it or not to do it. And I suspect, and I can't speak for all brands, that there isn't a awareness that this is a thing.
Yeah.
Because after all the people turning up to my tastings tend to be men, and it seems like it's all men talking about it. Well, it turns out that this is because we created this thing this way, and it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I'm 100% with you on this, and there's people in Ireland doing great jobs on trying to change this as well. And there's a few people who I think will make themselves known in the coming months on events they're going to run for women who want to just enjoy whiskey and maybe not have a man tell them about it. You know, so I think there's huge scope here, and distilleries and brands who aren't paying attention to 50% of the population. And as John Teeling has said, Lauren, you were in the room when he said it, fastest growing segment within whiskey is young women. And
exactly.
I mean, the Scotch whiskey industry has been dealing with this too. The old tropes of whiskey brands with their pictures of a red-headed, bearded man in a kilt and bagpipes as being the, and leather furniture and tartan wallpaper. Like, that's the old trope. It's a very different world now, isn't it?
Completely. It's, again, I think we mentioned this a few weeks ago, whiskey is moving away from that kind of, it's your grandfather or your father's drink. It really is changing, which is fantastic, but we do still have an awful lot of work to do. And I totally get your point, Barry, you're saying about when you host a tasting, it is mostly men. I mean, I found the same when I was an ambassador. You're standing up in front of a room full of men and maybe 2-3 women. Thankfully, even as I progressed in my ambassador role, I did see it start to change, but I feel like it is also quite an intimidating world for a woman in certain scenarios as well. Like, if you're part of a society or a club and you're showing up to tastings and there's 35 men and you're one woman in a room, it is sometimes a lot to deal with. So there's loads of clubs like our Whiskey Foundation, obviously I mentioned with Becky, supporting women and educating women in the industry. There's also one in Belfast. It's called the Angel Share, and it's specifically for women as well. So there are more women-only societies popping up, which I guess is great. It provides a sort of a comfortable space if there are those who don't want to be sort of in a room full of men. But yeah, I just think for gift guides, just have a bottle of whiskey. It doesn't need to be. I hate prosecco. Like I don't want to buy prosecco at any time of the year, so I don't want to see it in a gift guide. I want whiskey. So yeah,
and
a little of mine.
like brands, like let's not be stupid about it. What better marketing for your brand than young women drinking your whiskey? Let's be honest. That's going to attract others to the category who want to be around young women drinking whiskey in the craziest of ways. Like it's like a nightclub, nightclubs who offer free entry to women are free before midnight because they know that the men will pay to get in. It's crazy. Like we just have to, I think, in the most respectful of ways, be acknowledging of, lads, it's not 1943 anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Greg's just made a lovely point there, that he loves sharing the work of and success of Louise McGuane and Alex Thomas to his daughters. That's exactly what I mean, is support these incredible trailblazing women, which ultimately other younger women will look up to people like that and kind of think, actually, that's really cool. I want to drink whiskey. Like I want to do that. I want to be a blender. I want to be a distiller, an ambassador. It's a domino effect. If you just start it, you'll reap the rewards of it.
I want to be a Lauren McMullen when I grow up.
I wouldn't be on the same par as Louise or Alex now, but
listen. People don't know what's possible till they see somebody else doing it. Somebody else needs to break the mold. That's you. That's Alex. And other people.
Absolutely.
I would like to see in 2024 less scripted marketing and more connection. And what I mean by this is, I was reminded of this when I saw an ad for a new Irish whiskey today, made from the finest of barley, hand-selected casks, masterfully assembled from the greatest of character. I thought, okay, listen, stop the madness. We're smarter than this. We are smart in this, because if I see this made from the finest of barley, my next question is, well, who got the second best barley? Where did that go? It's like, the doctor. I finished top of my class. Well, where did the others finish? Like, so who's going to the doctor at the bottom of the class? I hate the marketing that's so scripted, so rehearsed, so formal and rigid that it's actually doing the opposite of what it's intending to do, which is to connect with people. I have a background in marketing and communications, and I can tell you that the things that work the best are not shot on a $30,000 or $300,000 budget for an ad campaign. They're shot on an iPhone, personally, with a little conversation from somebody. I'd love to see more distilleries put out their people, their characters, whether they work on the bottling line or they're the distillers or blenders. And I'd like to see them talking and telling us about what they're doing and giving us some insight. And maybe they're telling us about their job, their day, how they got there. Maybe they're talking about a new batch of whiskey that's released, whatever it is. I want to connect with the people. And I don't care about the language that the marketing agency you're paying $10,000 a month on retainer to put together communications are doing for you. I see through it. And everyone sees through it. And it's pointless. And these ridiculous social media posts that just show a full bottle of whiskey that's not open next to a glass that's mysteriously got whiskey in it. How did that get in there? Yeah, cocktail. Nobody even opened the bottle. It's a magic bottle. And they're saying, designed for a Tuesday. It's like, is it really designed for a Tuesday? And that's the ad. And they spent $5,000 on the photographer for the hour to get that done. It's mental. It's madness. Yeah. Anyway, I feel strongly about it.
No, it's one. Yeah, I actually think when I worked for Bush Mills, you messaged me about a post that was put up being like, why is the bottle still closed and there's an old fashioned in the glass?
I annoy many brands with this question. People hate me because I send a message saying, "Geez, you got one of the magic bottles that pours with the cap still on it." Fair play to you.
From the bottom. Yeah, I agree. I love when people are just really honest and authentic when they represent a brand. You resonate with them a lot more. I feel like you engage with the brand a lot more if you have someone who is speaking from the heart and not just they've read a script that they've learned for the past 6 months and are reciting it in front of you. And you can really tell. You can really tell the difference between someone who has it in their heart and someone who is just reading of something that they've learned. And when brands start to say things like, as you said, Barry, the finest barley, we hand select the casks. You're like, do you? Do you? You have millions of them. Do you? It's like, okay, you can make great whiskey and you can have a great brand without having to dive into all the spiel of it. Yeah.
And you don't need a comedian, you don't need a celebrity, you don't need a cartoon character to represent your brand. Some of the greatest, funniest, most engaging people I've ever met in my life work in the world of Irish whiskey. And I'd love to see them just having an old chat, having a bit of crack, explaining what they do. We've all had the chance, especially those who've been on the whiskey bus, to meet those behind the scenes, those who make the whiskey. And you'll know how engaging folks are when you get beyond the label, and you get beyond the bottle. Imagine more people getting to understand what that person is like. The Dahi O'Connells of the world, the Kevin O'Gormans of the world, Alex Thomases, and on we could go. They're the marketable bit.
Yeah. Not
the cartoon character or the glitzy ad. That's where I stand on that.
Exactly. The blenders, the distillers, the representatives that genuinely have a care and passion for the brand, put them in front of an audience every day.
Now, lest anyone watching this think that we are complaining or shaking a stick, I don't think you'll find two more obsessed people in the world of Irish whiskey than Lauren and myself, who will hero whiskey till the day we die. And we only say these things because I think it has a chance to go even further. And I think that with a little bit of maybe focus on some of these things, we could reach more people, we could convert more people, and we could get more people employed in this wonderful world we all work in.
Absolutely. No, this absolutely not. This is not brand. We're not targeting any brand specifically here. It's the overall industry. And I think to a certain extent, if we all pull together, more distilleries and brands pull together, especially on that education front, we all win. No one loses in that scenario. Ultimately, you just get more people into the realm of our world, Irish whiskey.
In 2024, I would like to see brands able to share with us where their whiskey is going, when it's going there, and how much it might cost to buy the thing. The first question I always ask when I get a press release, because it's rarely on it, is, when is this whiskey, or is this whiskey going to the United States? If so, what states is it going to? When is it going there? And I almost never get an answer, because the brands either don't know, or if they do know it's going to the US, they can't tell me when. And I know that some of these things are a moving target. Those that do know it's going to the US maybe are able to tell me the states, but then they're not able to tell me within the state where it goes. And I know the challenges. I've worked through the 3-tier system in the United States. I still work in the 3-tier system in the United States. And I understand that distributors and retailers, all that information, the information about the retailer doesn't often get to the brand. The brand just sees sales numbers on a weekly or a monthly basis. However, the information is available. The lines of communication haven't been developed to allow it to come back to the consumer. I've seen brands, I have spoken to brand owners who have told me their challenges of getting their whiskey off the shelves in the United States, who couldn't tell me what shelves they were on. So we have a problem there. Nobody's going to buy the whiskey if I can't point them to where it's going to be. So if we knew that certain whiskey was on a certain shelf, we could at least say it's there. And it's one of the questions that gets asked the most every time we talk about a new whiskey in our Facebook community. Is it coming to Florida? Is it coming to New York? And we have to say, we don't know.
I think there's a deeper problem there, and you briefly touched upon it, where the communication within a brand and within markets needs to improve. So it kind of needs to be at an internal level first before it reaches the consumer, because like in fairness, it happened to me. There were people messaging me like, I've seen this whiskey that's this cask finish. Where's it going? And I'm like, good question. You tell me. So there needs to be more of a communication between the markets that a brand exists in, sells in, before they're capable of actually telling you. So, like a representative in Ireland, generally 9 times out of 10 has absolutely not a notion of what is going on in Australia or France or Germany, because they're so specific to their own market. So it is something that brands need to improve at a local level before it moves on to the consumer.
I agree. So figure it out.
Figure it out.
This one is, I think it's quite topical. It's quite apropos because we've never had more Irish whiskies. We've never had such a saturation, honestly, of them, and of so many that are quite similar. So when you talk about having one large third-party distillery like the likes of Great Northern Distillery supplying 40% ABV, bourbon barrel-aged blend of 4% malt, 96% grain. If every brand heading to the United States has the same mash bill, but they're just in bottles with different labels and different price points, how does a consumer get to understand what's more valuable or what they want to buy, or is there anything worth buying? Similarly, there are whiskies coming out at tremendously high price points of late, and we've spoken about whiskey pricing. We're not against high-priced whiskies. We think there's a market for them, where there is a market for them, in the sense of if there is a market that understands the value of a thing at 5,000 euros or 40,000 euros, have at it. The problem lies somewhere in the middle, the $100, $200, $300 bottles, where somebody asks the question, why is it this price? That's a problem, because brands haven't found their unique value proposition. What's different about my whiskey? Why should you buy mine compared to the 55 others you are pitched across your social media feed or in your Facebook groups that you're in this week, this month, this year? So 2024, I think it's going to require brands to step out and say, I'm going to lean into this aspect. This is what we do really well. Now, if you don't do anything and you're just a merchant who just packs up bottles and sells them on to supermarkets, that's grand. That can be your value prop. But that's got a price limit too, because you can't go to $100 or $200 a bottle if you're just a supermarket whiskey. So price accordingly. But I think brands need to lean into what's their thing. Waterford has their terroir. Middleton for many years was at the Pot Still Distillery. J.J. Corrie is bringing back the lost art of bonding. W.G. O'Connell is a merchant that sources from not just Irish whiskey distilleries, but Scotch whiskey distilleries, rum distilleries. What's the value proposition is what I want to know.
Yeah, so essentially brands need to lean into their identity and be clear on that a little bit more to find their target audience and consumer.
I mean, there just isn't the market to just be, I make whiskey, like I sell whiskey, or hey, look, I've got a pot still whiskey. Okay, there's 45 other pot still whiskeys. Why should I pay attention? And I think that it's going to take a lot of work for brands to earn their place in that value chain.
Yeah, I actually think this arguably could be harder for brands who don't have a brand home and don't have a distillery to find their space. Because the likes of JJ Corrie, Two Stacks, yes, they're bonders, Dahi, but they have a story, they have an origin story. Bushmills, Middleton obviously do as well. But as you say, some of the source brands that are up and coming, I think will find it a little bit harder because they don't have that to lean on,
I know.
Tough.
Michael has a great point too about availability, that the distilleries need more stuff available on their web stores. He'd get more bottles, but can't find them near me. So I think there is a big disconnect. Again, Ireland being an comparatively immature logistics market for Irish whiskey. I think that we're figuring out the production piece, the marketing, just logistics, selling piece has a massive gap in it. Massive gap.
Mhm.
Any one of you who's been to Ireland or has looked on an Irish website, if you're visiting Ireland for information, I guarantee you've pulled your hair out saying, how come I'm on a restaurant website and it doesn't have their address or their opening hours? It's the same in the world of whiskey. How come I can go to a whiskey website and not only can I not find where the whiskey is available, but they haven't updated their website in 2 years. They've had 17 releases since. What am I supposed to do? So brands can be falling over themselves to release and sell a whiskey, but yet nobody can find it.
I was actually going to add that as a separate point completely about the availability of brands' releases on their website. I am such a firm believer in this that if a brand releases a whiskey, no matter which market it goes to, you should be able to order online. I just feel like everyone should be able to easily access a whiskey that they want. I know it takes away from the exclusivity of certain markets and you can go into a whole different sort of area there. But I think brand websites and brand homes, so distilleries, wherever a brand home exists, you should be able to buy their full range from that place.
I
If
agree.
you make the effort to come and see it, doesn't matter where that whiskey's been released. If you go to Middleton and maybe they've released a French exclusive, a Canadian exclusive, a US and Australian, whatever, you should still be able to buy it there. If you make the effort to come to their distillery, you should be rewarded with being able to buy whichever whiskey you want from that brand. I will die on this hill.
Don't go, don't die.
We're very passionate. As the whiskey goes in, the passion comes out here.
Honestly, we'd never be accused of sitting on the fence.
No, definitely
I don't
not.
like
Also,
fences.
I've switched up my whiskey. Have you changed yours?
You know what? I've kept sipping on the Redbreast. I'm really enjoying it, but I think I will switch to Clonakilty. So I'm going to open this one, double oak blend.
Lovely. I'm onto my Pars John's Lane Cask Strength, which is an absolutely beautiful drop.
Yeah, do you like that?
Really like it. Yeah, I'm a big Pars fan anyway. Like, honestly, one of my favorite whiskeys released in this year, and which I know will be one of my favorite whiskeys in general, is the Rye, as we all well know. It's quickly becoming one of my most reached for whiskeys. Crack and drop. For the price as well, it's great.
Drop of Clonakilty. Lovely. Sláinte.
Sláinte, folks. Let us know if you've updated what's in your glass as well, of course.
Greg said Barry going with normal size glasses. You're right. I forgot my party glasses downstairs.
That was quality. You'll have to bring it out for the Shebeen in 2 weeks' time, which will be the last before Christmas.
What's happening on that Shebeen, Lauren?
So on the what is that? 17th, Sunday the 17th. That will be obviously our last Shebeen before Christmas, because I don't think many people would tune in at midnight on or 7 p.m. on Christmas Eve at midnight in Ireland on a Sunday. I think we'd be fighting a losing battle there. So on the 17th, what I'm going to do is create a few festive serves, which between myself and Barry, we will communicate what they are well in advance of Sunday the 17th. So if you want to join us to make some drinks, to make some festive whiskey cocktails, you absolutely can. So you can kind of give me a gauge as to what you folks may be interested in. So I was thinking of either doing 3 really simple whiskey based festive serves or 3 twists on an old fashioned, because it's the easiest cocktail you will ever make in your life. So you can let me know what your preference may be. But anyway, I will be leading the charge. Barry will be sitting back drinking some cocktails, and I'll be making them.
It was quite a shrewd move on my behalf, requesting that you join the Shebeen, Lauren, because it gives me the old odd night off where I can just sit back and watch the hard work being done.
Exactly. Or you actually get more of a chance to actually have a sip of whiskey.
Honestly.
When I'm talking. Because before you were just constantly speaking, and it was maybe 3 sips in an hour. You've at least traveled that, so you're doing well.
That is a fact. All right. I think this is one of our last whiskey wishes, and then we'll take a few questions. Oh, actually, maybe there's one more after this. More collaborations with wine and spirit houses. I think this ties in earlier with what you were talking about, Lauren, with the wild cat. But
Yes.
I want to go a step further and say, like, you take, for example, you've got the big dogs in the fight. The Bushmills part of Proximo, Middleton Distillery part of Pernod Ricard. Those are brands. Proximo is a house of brands. Pernod Ricard is a house of brands. Is there no reason, or is there a reason why we don't have a the name of it is leaving me now. The cognac that is owned by Pernod. Oh, what's it called? Cognac.
I'm not
What's
sure.
the cognac that's owned by Pernod Ricard?
Let me Google that.
We've no researcher in real time. Martell. So why isn't there a Martell and Middleton collaboration? Two brands owned by the same parent company. I'd love to see Martell sippers opened up to Middleton brands and Middleton brands opened up to Martell, for example. And I think that I'd like to see brand value transference, the likes of which we got with Redbreast Lestau, where we got to learn about Lestau. Lestau got to benefit from being featured and showcased on a Redbreast product. And I think it was a great hat tip to collaboration.
I totally agree. Bushmills have done this to a certain degree with Proximo. They released let me get this right. It was a tequila, an aged tequila, which had aged in Bushmills malt casks. And it was a US exclusive. So it has been done within Proximo to an extent, but honestly, not shouted about enough. Like, you think, like, Jose Cuervo tequila is the #1 selling tequila in the world. So you shout about that, you do a collaboration with them, with Bushmills, and you've opened up a whole new audience. So yes, I totally agree. And to my point earlier as well, not necessarily even within a sort of a spirit company, but outside of it as well, I guess. I know, like, as I said before, there's more sort of issues there, but shout about it. People actually want that. Like, if you have people who love sort of martini, they love vermouth, tell them that a certain whiskey brand is using their casks to age their whiskey. Shout about it. Do it. Yeah.
There was another point I was going to make was, like, as a consumer, I want to know more about, I want to learn about spirit makers, wine makers. I'm fascinated when a collaboration comes out, because it allows me to go deeper into another rabbit hole of interesting and curious aspects. So I wouldn't underestimate the storytelling opportunities and the value that somebody will place on the additional layering of that story and that collaboration and what that'll be worth to somebody. So I'd like to see more of that in the world of Irish whiskey. We're big enough now and we're ugly enough to go out there and say, collaborate with me now. I'm an Irish whiskey. I think we should see more of it.
Totally.
The last one, Lauren.
Yes, this, I think our eyes were open to this. Certainly on the first whiskey bus, which I wasn't fully involved in. I was obviously still with Bushmills.
You were sniffing.
I was sniffing. Yes, I was. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. I think this is a great point. Every single distillery tour, everyone that you do in Ireland will start off with, so this is the mashing area. You're like, whiskey is made from 3 ingredients, and you're like, oh, here we go. There needs to be more of an individual stamp placed on how a distillery tells their story. I actually think every distillery in Ireland, and I know some do, there are a lot who do, but there are also equally as many who don't, offer a tiered tour system. So if you are a beginner and you don't know how whiskey's made, have an option for that. If you're slightly more advanced, you could maybe go to including some elements of production, maybe in a little bit more detail. And then the third option should maybe be, I am a pro, I've been drinking and collecting whiskey, learning about it my whole life. I want to do something different. And that tour could maybe be a history lesson, a blending lesson, something along those lines. There needs to be a third system, because I actually think consumers who love their whiskey and know about whiskey are losing out massively here when they visit distilleries. It's great to see the brand home, but you're still going to hear the exact same information being relayed in a different way.
I couldn't agree
So
more.
I just remember, Barry, you messaged me because obviously Bushmills, when you visited us, it was like the last stop, the second last distillery, one of the last days anyway, last year. And I remember the message you sent me being like, please don't talk about production.
Don't tell us how you make the whiskey.
Myself and Alex were like, got it. Whisked everyone through into a warehouse, no problem. So yeah, and I think obviously that's what Irish Whiskey Experiences strives to do, is provide something that is outside the ordinary and away from that sort of, I don't like the word standard, but the kind of sort of standard offering of a distillery tour and how whiskey is made. But that's exactly why we're here, is because we know there is a market for that, and people do want to learn more, and they can learn more through Irish Whiskey Experiences.
Well, it's interesting that, like you talked about, how whiskey geeks will want to know more, and whiskey geeks are probably the ones who'll spend the most on exclusive distillery exclusives and things that they can't get anywhere else. And yet they're the very ones that, like, if somebody from Germany who is a whiskey nerd, a whiskey aficionado, came to Ireland for 10 days to visit whiskey distilleries, the chances are every whiskey distillery they'll go to will tell them again how whiskey was made. And by the time they get to the last one, they'll be a distiller. So I think that it's, I think that's definitely something that has to be borne in mind. When I was in Scotland a few weeks ago, same thing. Almost every distillery, the basic tour was how whiskey was made. Now, I went to one distillery and I was the only one on the tour. It was late in the afternoon. And by this stage now, I'd visited 5 or 6 distilleries. And look, the way whiskey is made in Scotland does not differ vastly from how it's made in Ireland. So I pulled the guide aside and I said, bit of an odd request, but can we not do the how whiskey is made tour? And she looked at me and said, what? Sorry? I said, it's just me, right? Like, I'm the only one. She said, yeah. I said, well, look, the time that you take to explain that, do you mind just if I ask questions about the history and the people? And okay, she was kind of taken aback, but it was the most enjoyable thing because we didn't have to go through here's the temperature of the mash tun and here's the number of hours it takes to ferment, and it made for a more enjoyable experience. So I think you're right.
100%. And even I noticed a few distilleries, if you do opt for a more premium experience, it's still the how whiskey is made tour with a couple of extra whiskeys on the end at the tasting.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a totally different experience. It's just slightly enhanced. So yeah, it would be great. It would be great if distilleries did think about the more premium, really enthusiastic, really knowledgeable consumer. And I mean, don't get me wrong, most distilleries like Jameson and Bow Street, Bushmills, they thrive off tour buses, which are very low-level consumers. That's absolutely fine. That's no problem. That is their bread and butter.
Can you call them something else instead of low-level consumers? Maybe we can be is there a kinder phrase we can use?
Or a kinder phrase than standard. I hate the word standard tour as well, but slightly less knowledgeable consumers, which is totally fine. Obviously, something has to exist for them, but maybe focus on the other end as much as the standard end. I hate that word, but yeah.
Folks, have we been unreasonable in our wishes? Have we shared some of the hopes and dreams for our fledgling industry that we're all employed in? This is the industry we want to see thrive and grow, and I think we can learn from how other nations and industries do it. I think we can learn from what we've experienced and what we'd like to see ourselves. I think we can learn from outside the whiskey industry, but I would hope that wishes and requests in enough quantity find their way to distilleries and brands, because at the end of the day, the greatest, the most successful businesses of all make something that somebody wants. And that's all we're asking. Let's not reinvent the wheel. Let's not make something and look for people to buy it. Let's listen to the people who know what they want and make that thing for them. It's a lot quicker.
That's it though. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just trying to slightly tweak and adjust what already exists. So I don't think anything we asked for tonight is totally unreasonable. It might take a few years in terms of changing the law for certain things, but it's reasonable. I think we're good. Next week will be interesting though.
So next week we're gonna give our rundown of our most fun moments of 2023 in the world of Irish whiskey.
Yep.
I'm gonna have to think about that. I'm gonna have to think about that this week.
So is this now this is a good one? Is that a most fun that we have been directly involved in, like our personal highlights or general highlights, say certain releases, certain distilleries opening, or
That's
everything?
A good question. That's a
Could
good
be
question.
everything.
Maybe it's our whiskey highlights, whether we were involved or not.
Yeah. I think that's the easiest option because it might be a certain release that you loved. It might be a certain experience.
This is basically going to be an event sponsored by Powers Rye then.
Sitting up there wherever it is. Yes, because massive shout out to Powers Rye for creating my favorite whiskey of the year.
Bye American Rye. Yeah.
Exactly.
Folks, we've said a lot. Maybe too much. But we wanted to share our thoughts and our hopes for 2024. Our fingers are crossed it's going to be a successful year in the world of Irish whiskey. It'll be a year of change, as 2023 has been, a year maybe of firsts. We'll see new distilleries maybe launch their first whiskies on the market, including Clonakilty Distillery. Mm-hmm. Their first whiskey, their first pot still whiskey, will hit the market, I believe, around May in 2024, which is very exciting. It's already finding its way into their blended products. They're replacing the malt components in some of their blends with their own pot still whiskey, which is great to see. And we'll see other distilleries release their first whiskies, inaugural whiskies as well. So there'll be lots to talk about in 2024. Will there be casualties along the way? No doubt. I'm sure some businesses won't make it. For that, we're sad, but we can't see any one or two businesses going by the wayside as being an indicator of anything other than that business just didn't work. And I'd hate to think that one or two businesses closing or changing their focus was any signifier of a global slowdown or a lack of interest in Irish whiskey. I think, touch wood, we're a long way away from that, as long as we can keep doing what we're doing.
Absolutely. No, I feel like every single year that I've been in the industry, I've learned something new. I've met incredible people. There's been things that have absolutely blown my mind. There's been pours that have blown my mind, tastings that have distillery experiences, and long may they continue. Long may we have our minds blown by what this industry has to offer.
Folks, what do we need to share with you next? I think that's it for tonight. We're wrapping up here. We've covered all of our wishes. For those of you who are members of our Stories and Sips Whiskey Club, I hope to see you on Wednesday night with Dahi O'Connell for our W.D. O'Connell whiskey tasting for our club casks. We, for those of you who joined late, we have our new Stories and Sips whiskey kits have been produced and are about to be filled for tastings in January and February. Lovely Stories and Sips box there. Look at that. To hold our samples, 3 1-ounce samples will go in there to be shipped to you. Just stick the label on top. Boom. That's coming. We'll have a Redbreast tasting. We'll have a Connacht Distillery tasting. We'll have a Method and Madness tasting. There's lots happening. I'm excited for 2024. Sinead.
And a few buses.
4 to 5 whiskey buses. Yeah.
I'll be busy.
Folks, thanks for all your support, and I'll thank you again next week because there'll be no avoiding the highlight of the year for me being just the growth of the Whiskey Club and all of your support along the way. If you're not a member of Stories and Sips Whiskey Club, we'd love you to join and get access to our sample kits. That'll be going out in January as well. And oh yes, there's one more thing. We will have one more tasting in December, a chance to build our blend. We've got cans going out to you. 40 lucky Whiskey Club members are going to be part of our blending team. We're going to create the next Stories and Sips Whiskey Club release. More details on that this coming week. We'll be opening up the links to purchase a blending kit and we'll be sending those out by the end of next week. It's with 2 stacks. We'll have a blending cast with our Stories and Sips blender, Eric Flynn, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So stay tuned for that. And other than that, Shanae.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, as always, for your support and tuning in. It's much appreciated. It's good to see everyone's faces and comments every week.
We'll see you in the group during the week, folks, and we'll chat to you all next week. Have a great week. Be safe, be healthy, drink lots of Irish whiskey responsibly. Sláinte.
Sláinte, everyone.